What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my story series for Pillars of Eternity, the first one, that is. This video is primarily going to be for people who would like to see the story of Pillars of Eternity and not much else. I'm not covering the side quests in any great depth. There are a couple points throughout the story where you have to do some side quests, but for the most part, we're going to be sticking to the critical path of the game, as the game itself likes to call it, which is to say the main story. Beyond that, again, not really covering side quests in any particular depth. The game is divided into 4 acts, so I will pretty much be trying to do a part per act. That said, Act 2 is basically the bulk of the actual game. Acts 1, Acts 3, and Acts 4 are not particularly long or in-depth or engaging. Act 2 is basically the bulk of probably 70% of the game. So just keep that in mind as we're going forward. But today we're going to be covering Act 1 in Part 1 here. So let's dive into it. Again, not really covering character creation in any great depth, but suffice to say it's very kind of D&D-ish with its approach. There are classes and stuff that you can pick through. Kind of all the standard ones you would think of. I actually cover more about it in a separate video that's not really this. But suffice to say, once you've created your character, you find yourself en route to the Gilded Vale in Deerwood. Now, depending on the backstory you chose, you might actually get some different options in the conversations with the camp here that you've set up, because you yourself have fallen ill with an illness that is kind of not really explained, like stomach pains or something. And the caravan master, Odima or something like that, stops the caravan for the night. You guys are going to make camp and get back to it in the morning because they think there might be a storm blowing through anyway. Now, you're on your way to Gilded Vale because the Lord of the Land is actually offering land and houses and things for settlers that come to the area and agree to work the land. So, like I mentioned, you get sick. You are assigned one of the caravan guards, Caliska, who is going to take you and kind of search for berries that should be nearby that, could be brewed into something to kind of help ease your stomach or whatever. So you guys go do that. You can have a conversation with Caliska, but, whatever. You do find the berries, and then you are supposed to go meet another caravan guard who had found water for you to drink after you found the berries. So once you actually go to meet up with this guard, you do and find out that he was murdered by none other than Glanfathans. So Glanfathan, I think I'm pronouncing that right, but that general term, they guard a set of ruins that you are camped outside of. Now, the Glanfathans here say that someone has trespassed upon their territory there because, again, they protect these ruins. If you trespass, they will kill you. Pretty widely known. Now, no one from your camp has gone inside as far as you know, so you try to basically reason with them and be like, that totally wasn't us, but they're not really about it and try to kill you anyway. Now, once this happens, you head back to the camp which you had previously left and find out that pretty much all of the caravan has been slaughtered by Glanfathans. They have a hostage with them, and you can kind of negotiate with the leader a little bit. If you have the right skill checks, you can kind of save the guy who's being held hostage. However, it's not really worth it, and you'll see why here in a little bit. It doesn't really matter what happens here, because regardless of how this conversation goes, you're going to probably wind up fighting these guys. And then lastly, a storm comes through that the leader of the caravan mentioned before he died. It is called a Biawak. It's sort of again, I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's sort of a spirit storm that is known to rip people's souls from their body. And they are pretty much unsurvivable. You basically have to seek shelter or you're more than likely going to die. Having just fought off these Glanfathans that had attacked the caravan, you and Caliska make haste for the entrance to the ruins you were camped outside of that the Glanfathans were protecting before the Biawak comes through, and this is how you were able to get through it. Now, there's a short little dungeon here that you will find your way through. It's very short. There's 2 paths through it. You can find a chisel and go through a wall or solve a puzzle that involves some tile traps on the floor, either or. You're going to get through the ruins here, and you're going to come out on the other side into a little clearing. And you're going to see a hooded figure and a group of 3 other people performing a ritual with some sort of ancient machinery. Now, we don't know exactly what this is at the time, but basically the hooded robed figure gives a speech about the other 3 sacrificing themselves. He walks off, they begin their ritual, and it kills them. It does something to them. They seem to have sacrificed themselves in service of whatever this is. And you kind of black out from here. And when you come to, you find out that Caliska is dead. The 3 guys that I mentioned have turned to stone or something like that down below in the little clearing area. You yourself have survived, which is strange because, everyone around you is dead. You should be dead. And as you get up and start moving around, it mentions that your vision is weird. You start seeing things in the corner of your vision that just don't actually seem to be there. Now, from here, being the sole survivor of this caravan, you need to make haste for Gilded Vale, where you were originally headed. Now, to do that, you're going to actually have to pass through a place called the Vale Wood, which involves some quests and stuff you may or may not go and do. But regardless, you're going to head to Gilded Vale, which is a short ways away. Now, once you get there, you're going to be stopped by a magister of sorts, and he's going to tell you all about the Hollowborn crisis. So the reason this lord is offering land and things like that to settlers is because the Deerwood is under the grips of this thing called the Hollowborn crisis, or otherwise known as Widewind's Legacy. Now, you learn a lot from this conversation. This is a huge info dump if you've never played the game before. Widewind is a guy who decided he was the avatar of the god Eothas and attacked the Deerwood. He was killed with a giant bomb. They literally blew him up. However, ever since that happened, which was called the Saints' War not too long ago, children have been being born as what is called Hollowborn, which is basically that they don't have a soul. They're lifeless. You might as well be giving birth to a zombie. It's physically alive, but the lights aren't on, so to speak. Now, this same magister also tells you that the lord of the land, Raedric, his wife is with child and due any day, and because of that, he can't process your stuff with all this land that I mentioned earlier, and also that he hired some animancer to help make sure his wife's child was not born Hollowborn, but that didn't work out, and that's what the deal is with all of these bodies in the tree that you should be able to see here, which is obviously kind of the biggest thing going on. The magister here tells you that basically there's nothing he can do right now. Go rest at the inn or wherever and come back to him later, which is pretty much what you should do. If you choose to go to the inn, you can meet Aloth. Aloth is one of the many companions you can get, but isn't really the focus of this, so we won't spend a ton of time on him, but suffice to say, if you're not going for the achievement for doing the game solo, it's wise to pick him up. Now, once you rest, you can go back and talk to the Magister again. Now, when you go back to talk to the Magister, right before you had gone to go rest, the bell tolling out that the Lord's child had been born had rung out across the town. And basically it wasn't good news. Something had happened. Now, once you are talking to the Magister here the second time, he explains that the child wasn't born well, and that basically it was either Hollowborn or died during birth, or etc., etc. So basically the Magister is like, you should probably leave. That said, when you had rested just a moment ago, you had a dream about a dwarven woman hanging from the tree that we saw earlier, the very striking tree with the dead bodies that's real hard to miss. If you walk up to that tree after this conversation and basically being told to leave the Gilded Vale, you can go talk to, well, not talk to per se, but you can walk up to the tree where this dwarven woman's body is hanging from. And then you start talking to it all of a sudden in kind of a weird way, or its spirit, that is. The dwarf woman here explains that she was an animancer, a person who studies souls, which we already knew that. We kind of got that conversation from the Magister. However, she explains that the reason you're having this conversation is because whatever happened to you back there in those ruins actually turned you into a watcher. A watcher is someone who can study souls, basically. They can see things that aren't necessarily there. And you kind of tell her that, ever since that bivouac that you survived, that you shouldn't have been able to survive, this has been happening. And, you need help with this. Obviously, the land with this town isn't going to work out with everything that we just learned a bit ago. And from there, this woman directs you to a place called Caed Nua. Apparently, there is another watcher who used to live around here, but because of all of the craziness going on with the Hollowborn situation, basically anybody involved in animancy or souls in any way, such as a watcher, because, you can literally see them, isn't real popular right now. So Maerwald was basically kind of like pushed to the edge of a place called Caed Nua. He had already been living there, kind of helping people out, but lately he's been ostracized more than normal. Now, as we leave that conversation with the dwarf woman, we can talk to the guy who's standing just outside the tree, who is actually Adair. He is a veteran of the Saints' War. You can pick him up as a companion as well. That's why I mentioned him. Again, we're not really going to, talk about that too much. The main objective of the actual story is to leave the Gilded Vale and go to Caed Nua. Now this actually is where the first bit of exploration begins. You can't go to the main city just yet, however you can explore a decent couple of areas if you choose before you actually go to Caed Nua. The only one that I'm going to mention here is Magrin's Fork, because in Magrin's Fork you can meet a priest of Magrin, Magrin being the goddess of fire and trials. Her priest, Durance is his actual name, basically says that he saw you in a vision and basically demands to accompany you. From here, we can head to Caed Nua. Caed Nua is an old abandoned stronghold of sorts out in the wilderness of the Deerwood. Now, once we arrive there, we'll immediately notice someone singing outside the gates. It turns out that this person is Kana. He is a Mawa chanter, which is, a Mawa is a race and chanter is a class. And he is looking for a tome of knowledge in the keep. So you can also take him along with you as a companion too, should you so choose. Now, the keep itself is infested with ghosts and skulders or ghouls or whatever they're called. But basically, it's like a ghoul, more or less. You know, pretty much standard fantasy stuff. Anywhere dead bodies are found, that kind of thing. Now, once we actually start exploring inside the keep, we'll notice this big throne, and it talks to you, actually. It turns out that this is known as the steward. The steward was the person who originally designed the keep when it was built over 200 years ago. Because it was her greatest work, she asked to be made part of it somehow, and somehow they managed to transfer her soul into like the keep itself. And she speaks through this bit of statue. Now, she explains that the keep, for all intensive purposes, belongs to Maerwald. However, Maerwald hasn't been contacting her lately. He's using his powers as a watcher to keep her unaware of his location. And she also explains that her and Maerwald used to be working on fixing up the keep together. And also, lastly, she'll tell you that the keep is built on a thing called the Endless Paths, which is like a huge, crazy maze down below the keep that involves some other stuff. Now from here, we need to find Maerwald. It's pretty easy. You just actually go down the door that opens after you talk to the steward, which is the prison area, get through there, go down one more floor into what is actually the first level of the Endless Paths, and you can kill some monsters to find a key or just picklock the door like right at the beginning of this map, and that's where Maerwald is. And then you can talk to him. What I didn't tell you is that as you are exploring the keep, you will be running across spirits. So these spirits, now that you know that you're a watcher, are actually people's souls from the past. These are dead people that you're seeing. And if you talk to them, they kind of explain their their story, basically. One of them is a soldier, one of them is a marauder. It all kind of seems incoherent for the most part. Like, it's kind of like, why is it telling me this stuff kind of thing? But once you get to Maerwald, that pretty much explains itself real quick. So Maerwald is absolutely insane. However, you will get some useful information out of him. Maerwald explains what a watcher actually is, that you see souls of the dead or the living. And he also explains that you can use this information to help people, because if you can see someone's soul and their past lives' soul, because Maerwald is where we find out about the concept of the wheel if you hadn't picked it up yet. It's possible to learn about this well beforehand, especially if you did your prior research to playing the game, but Maerwald explains it kind of better, and I think it's the appropriate place to talk about this. In the world of Aora for Pillars of Eternity, souls get recycled. So every time someone dies, their soul returns to what they call the wheel, which is a natural metaphysical process that essentially pulls souls to these giant green Adra stones that are around the world and then recycles them into someone else. However, when they get reborn, they don't remember who they were, and usually it's to that soul's detriment, like they're less than they were before. Maerwald explains that the reason you probably survived the bivouac, and you can also learn this from the dwarven woman earlier, is that you are more than likely in possession of what is known as a strong soul, which means basically when you are recycled through the wheel, your soul doesn't break apart like a lot of other souls do, which is also more than likely why you became a watcher when this bivouac went through. Now, the other important thing we learn from Maerwald here is that the reason you've been having these crazy visions since this happened is that you suffered from something that is called an awakening. So basically, when these souls get recycled, they are told to forget their past lives, so to speak. However, an awakening is when the person who is living right now remembers a past life, and that personality or memories or traits suddenly spring to the surface. This usually involves some sort of insanity to ensue, and this is where we find out that this is what is happening to Maerwald and is also what is happening to you. So the reason Maerwald is insane is because he was also awakened after a while, and these spirits are taking control of him and he's slowly losing his mind. This is apparently a very common problem for Watchers to have because of their innate ability to actually see souls. They become awakened very often. It's a very common thing that happens to them. So basically, being a Watcher combined with an awakening tends to drive you insane because you can actually interact with souls on more of a level than the average person can. Now, when you ask Maerwald, is there something that can be done about this? He tells you to find the leaden key. He says it more fanciful than that basically you need to go to a city and find members of the leaden key. Now, after this, Maerwald will attack and try to kill you because his personalities, personas, whatever you want to call them, decide that, you're an enemy and you need to die because he's insane. So you wind up having to kill Maerwald in self-defense, and after that you can decide what to do with his soul, which is a big moment, and it becomes kind of a big part of the lore that, in addition to being a Watcher, you can manipulate soul energy to some degree. So when someone dies like this in an important way, you can direct their soul as to where they need to go to find their next life, that kind of thing. It becomes a major plot point later, and it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg right here. And basically you can return him to the wheel and kind of let him pass from this world. You can take his knowledge into yourself, or you can have him basically also guard the grounds of Caed Nua as well. Now from here, we can go back upstairs, talk to the steward, and basically explain that Maerwald died. But she already kind of knows this because she felt him pass. Now, the steward will basically tell you that two things here. One, the place that Maerwald was telling us about is actually Defiance Bay, which is a city not too far from here. But in order to get there, you're going to have to fix up the keep, which actually has a double meaning because Maerwald was the owner of Caed Nua, so to speak, as far as the actual castle itself was concerned, because it seems to have a bit of a mind of its own, as you probably noticed. The steward basically explains that, if you want, you can help her fix this place back up, which you're going to have to do to fix the wall to get to Defiance Bay. And after that, Caed Nua becomes your stronghold, which you can again help fix up, and you kind of become the owner of this place. And throughout the story, you can kind of make renovations and that kind of thing. But from here, she also explains that in addition to going to Defiance Bay, Maerwald talked about a queen that was, and the steward explains that that's more than likely Wodica, who has a temple in Defiance Bay, and you should probably start your search there once you get there. After this, you can construct the wall that you need to get through to go to Defiance Bay, which is instantaneous because apparently the materials or something were set aside. However, in the future, every upgrade you make to the keep will take days of in-game time. After that's done, you head out towards Defiance Bay. Along the way, you can pick up yet another companion, Sagani, which is a dwarven ranger who comes with a pet who I recommend you pick up. She's fun. And then after that, you head to Defiance Bay. Now, upon entering Defiance Bay, that ends Act 1. That's where we're going to leave it, guys. That is Act 1 for you. We were going to the Gilded Vale. We got hit by a bivouac, managed to survive it, somehow became a Watcher as a result, went to the Gilded Vale where we found out that we weren't going to get any land. We're basically told to leave because, you're weird. We had a conversation with a dwarven woman after a dream told us to, who explained that we're a Watcher now, we can see souls. Recommended that we go talk to Maerwald, who was also a Watcher. We went to talk to him. He is crazy, which is foreshadowing of what is likely to happen to us if we don't do something about the awakening we had, which is what caused us to become a Watcher when we were in the bivouac. And then we headed to Defiance Bay. So ends Act 1. Act 2, like I mentioned, is actually kind of the bulk of the game, where we will start hunting down these leaden key people who, it would appear, were actually the people at the machinery who caused, seemingly, the bivouac and us to become a Watcher, and thus our awakening, which is probably going to slowly start to drive us insane. So there is Act 1, guys. There you go. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and stick around. But thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.